Hello and welcome to yet a new episode of my Flosstube. I'm glad you're joining me again. I have been meaning since the first episode to thank a couple of people and somehow I forgot, so my apologies. The first person I want to thank is Ellen Reed of Maximum Cross Stitch Power Hour. If you haven't watched her yet, do check her channel out. I will link to all of those down in the description below as well. Ellen has been really kind to me. She's been really supportive and encouraging to get me started with my own Flosstube channel. And together with her, we did the Zimmermann coverlet, which many of you have been buying, and to which 25% of the proceeds are being donated to the Red Door shelter in Toronto. So thank you if you have bought that one. That one has been an amazing success, that pattern. To date, I have been able to raise 1,400 Canadian dollars for the shelter, which is just extraordinary. So thank you so much for helping me out doing that. And of course, any sales that are still coming in, the 25% of those will be donated to the Red Door. So thank you so much for that. Also, I want to thank Kim from Sassy Jack's Stitchery. I sat down last year with Kim for her soiree, which was really lovely. We did a little video together, a live video, and it took away a little bit of the awkwardness initially of sitting down and doing a chat with you guys. But it really stimulated me to actually sit down and do this properly for everyone and not just for a limited group of people. So and Kim has been very supportive and has been stocking my designs for many years now, and she was one of the first shops in the US to offer my patterns to her customers in a physical form. So thank you so much, Kim, for that one. There's also been a lot of Flosstubers who have been very kind and given me shout outs. Now, I haven't seen all of them yet, but I've seen a couple of them, and I just wanted to say thanks to a couple of them here. Shiloh, also known as X-Stitch MD, do check out her Flosstube. She's a great, talented stitcher. Lisa of Kindred Stitcher as well. There's Brenda and Laura from Brenda and the Serial Starter, who are fabulous. Just guys, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to see all of your videos, and I really enjoy them, so thank you. Also, a really big thank you to all of those who have joined in on my Stitch Along this year. There've been a lot, and it's the biggest Stitch Along to date. And I just wanted to give you an impression of how many people there are stitching. So there's hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world. So on this map here, you can see all of the countries that have joined so far. And I've listed here the countries as well, so you can have a look there as well. Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining in. It's really lovely having you all, and I'm really proud of having such a beautiful, diverse, lovely crowd of people who are stitching my designs. And now when you look at Instagram, some people, everyone has different speeds in stitching, and I don't want to, because I don't think you should have to finish the January panel in January, so don't feel pressure at all. Stitching should be fun, so I don't want you to feel pressured in any way, but I did want to share these finishes who came in very quickly, but purely because they are just beautiful and I love the colors and they're so different from one another. So I thought I've asked all these lovely Instagrammers if they would mind me sharing their stitching with you. So we're going to look at a couple of those right now. So as you can see, it's wildly varied. It's really exciting. So thank you all for being so kind for letting me use your images. From the coming months onwards, I will also share some that are not as far. So if you're happy for me, I will contact you and to ask your permission before I show them in this video here. But yes, it's fantastic. So I'm already looking forward to February. So thank you guys. There's quite a few questions, so I thought we would continue our Q&A now. So there's been a lot of questions. It's really fantastic to see all of your questions coming in. Do keep them coming in the comments here below. I really like reading them, and they are really inspiring for me to do future videos. So if you have any question to me, just fire away and I will try and answer them in upcoming videos. If your question hasn't been answered yet in this video or in previous videos, if you have asked me a question, it is on the list to be answered, so it will happen in the future. So the first question was, a couple of people asked me this. Alice Walling and Suzanne Hernandez both were wondering about samplers, patterns, and what their purpose was. So what is a sampler, pattern, and a design? So very strictly speaking, a pattern is anything that can be repeated. So it's when you have a cross-stitch pattern, it is technically a printed piece of paper, and you reproduce that. You can do that an infinite amount of times. So that's why that's called a pattern. If you look at your wallpaper, that will also be a pattern because it will be repeated. So anything that repeated is a pattern. A design is something that could be a part of a pattern, but it could also be a completely unique thing that stands on its own. As an example, if I would paint a vase and I would paint something on it, that would be a design, but because it does not repeat, it is not per se a pattern. And the last one, what is a sampler? Now, everyone has an image in their heads of what a sampler is, and I think a lot of you guys will kind of know what a sampler is because we're all cross stitches here. But there are distinctions between samplers, and I thought it would be quite nice to sort of talk a little bit about what samplers are and what types of samplers there are, and I thought I would show you a couple of them from my personal collection. I have some really beautiful old samplers in my collection, so I thought I'd show and share them with you. So the first thing that you have to know is samplers, as most of you will know, were stitched by young girls, and some of them were very young. I have seen samplers by girls who were only 6 years old when they already were starting to stitch a complete full alphabet samplers. But they would also be stitched by grown-up women to sort of commemorate certain times in their life, and I have an example of that one here as well. But every country has different distinctions in samplers and sampler traditions, but I thought I would share it from my perspective. I'm Dutch, so I've grown up with Dutch samplers, and there are 4 distinct varieties of samplers in the Netherlands. So the first one is called a letterlap. Now, it literally means a letter cloth. At one point in time, we used to call them letterdoek. I know that the Scandinavians still use the word doek to indicate a stitched cloth as well. At some point that changed to lap. I don't know when, but it happened. But there are some really famous letter cloths, especially in my home province of Friesland. So for instance, this one here is a really beautiful example of a Frisian letter cloth. And it's beautiful, finely stitched. It has a huge selection of alphabets. I do plan to release this as a pattern for plainly full crosses and backstitch. So hopefully then you would be able to stitch this on Aida fabric as well. But this type of sampler would be used to decorate bed linens and things like that. So it had a very good purpose. It was a good show for a girl to, I'll put this away first, that she was a good needlewoman, and you have to remember that back in the day, now we throw our laundry in a machine and it comes out dry if we're lucky. But back then you would have to do everything by hand. You had bleach fields where when I grew up, we still had something called Blake in my village, and it was where the women would literally go and put their white linens to bleach in the sun, because it's the best bleach there is. It's completely natural, and if you have any white fabrics and you want to freshen them up and get them white, put them out in the sun. So these bleach fields were filled with all these different bed linens, and of course they're white square sheets. So you would need to stitch your initials or your name on them to make sure that you knew that you were bringing home the right bed linens again, so there wouldn't be fights in the bleach field about whose stitching was there where. And this is a Scottish alphabet sampler. I thought I would share that one as well. And these not only had the purpose of course, learning how to stitch, but it was a great way of learning your alphabets as well and learning to write. So it had a couple of functions for a girl. They could mark their work with little initials so they wouldn't lose their linens, but they would also learn to read and write through this system of stitching these lovely little samplers. So that's the first one. The second type of sampler, I already touched briefly on that, was the marking cloth. And the marking cloth sometimes tells us a little bit about the location where she was stitched, because they're like the Frisian letter cloths. They're very distinct in their style, and they can be anything really. So there's quite a few different types of marking cloths. They also are among the oldest varieties. I have one here which is fully done in queen stitch. That's this one here, and it is in a frame, and I can't take that out right now, but I have a smaller version of that. Sadly, this is not dated. I'll put that here again carefully. There is another one here that I have, which I have just recently purchased, and this is a Dutch one, and it has some beautiful queen stitch or rococo stitch, depending on what you call it. And I think that's really, really lovely. She marked it with MSP, so that's probably her initials. But for the rest, these were pieces that you would use to stitch future projects. So if you wanted a cloth, these were not meant to be pretty and framed in a way to be pleasing for the eye. It was more like you had a reference piece that you would keep in your stitching basket, and you would pull it out, and when you needed to stitch something, you could then use that. And there's quite a wide variety of these. There is whitework ones. So this is a very old Dutch whitework marking cloth. And as you can see, this is not finished, because the maker would just continue to stitch when they would see a little pattern. Maybe a neighbor had a nice pattern and they would use that. And then they could start working on that one. I have a very beautiful large one, which is a band sampler. Now, this is probably from the later half of the 17th century. So you're looking at 1650 to 1700 roughly. And it is a beautiful piece. And that's this one here. It is a very large one. I'll try and show you like this. And this is a sampler. I'll bring it a little bit closer as well to the camera. This is a sampler that has a lot of beautiful bands on it, and it is quite typical for the area north of the River IJ in the Netherlands. And people used to think that it was stitched in the village of Marken because of the distinct little borders, but now more and more sort of scholars in cross-stitching, they are thinking that it has more to do with the region north of the IJ River, as there actually are quite a few areas around that where they have also found samplers that they have been able to locate. And it is a really beautiful way of keeping your stitching. So this was not really meant to be framed or kept, but it was more a piece of fabric that you could refer to when stitching. So it's like we purchase our patterns now. They would have their own little pattern selection that they had stitched up in their boxes and that they could get back to and use as reference material. And of course the word sampler, it comes from example or exemplaire. It is an example to be used again, so that's what the traditional samplers really were. Then that brings us to the third type of sampler, which is the darning sampler. Now I have a couple of them in my collection, but this one is not framed, so it will be a good one to show you. And this one is from 1874. I have some earlier ones as well, but this one is extremely fine. It is absolutely beautifully stitched. You can see that here. And this would be used to mend pieces. So there's like a damask style mending here going on with very complex pieces. But it would also be really handy if you were a girl and you had to fix your socks. You could do all these things, and it was part of the education of girls to stitch these. This one has a really cute little dog, which is a little bit typical of Berlin woolwork, although this one is stitched in beautiful colored silks on extremely fine linen, and that is just a really extraordinary piece. Behind me on the wall, I will try and catch that for you, is an older one. And this one is from 1824, and that's this one here, and that's just a really beautiful sampler as well. And I do love them because they're practical, they're really beautiful, and they also inspire me to try and mend stuff instead of just buying new things. That's that type of sampler. The last type of sampler is the embroidered cloth one. Now, and this is what most of us will know as a typical sampler, because it is a little bit more modern. It's sort of since the 19th century, the fashion became that girls would start not just making very practical samplers, but more decorative samplers. So they would still have an educational purpose of teaching how to stitch and what to stitch and everything. But they were meant to be pleasing, and they were meant to be framed and be a nice focal point in a house. And I do love them because they would be stitched by girls who would make these samplers. And a lot of these girls, because they were made from all backgrounds, a lot of these girls would be from poorer working class backgrounds, and they did not have a lot of colour in their houses. This is before paintings became available for people, or other exciting colour images. And to cheer up your house, it would be really lovely to put some colour in. So this Dutch sampler is an example of a later 19th century. It's stitched in chemical dyes, and I love it. I have charted it. I will be releasing this soon. I will try and stitch it as well. I'm going to stitch mine in different colours. But I really like this sampler. It's got a beautiful little colourful alphabet here. There's a nice rooster here in the middle, and the little trees with the birds on it. It's a fairly quick stitch as well. It's just over 100 by 100 crosses, so it is a very small sampler, but it is just really fun. So I will be releasing that one very soon. Another sampler that is new, is in my shop now, and is linked below here as well, is this one. Now, I thought of sharing this one with you because we're in January and we're looking at February and Valentine's Day. And even though I don't do Valentine's Day, I am not really a romantic person that way. Sorry. I do like the celebration of love. I think it's a beautiful idea. And I thought in the run up to Valentine's Day, I would do a couple of samplers that have a romantic theme with them, because although I'm not very sort of mushy and all that, I do like celebrating love in any aspect. So this one here, I'll show it like this. It's a very large sampler. You can see the image on my website properly as well when you click on that. This is the wedding sampler that Heike Hazelhoff stitched. Now, Heike was a girl from a very well-off family in Groningen, in the province, which is a province in the Netherlands in the north. In Groningen, they had a very odd tradition for a couple of decades from, I'm not sure exactly, I think it's the 1820s to the 1860s, around that time, 60s, 70s, where girls would stitch completely black or very dark brown samplers. And this one was stitched to commemorate Heike's wedding and her marriage to Ado Jans de Boer. And they married in May 1856, so it mentions that here. But what is really special about this sampler is that it has all of the birthdays of Heike, who was born on the 17th of August 1831, Ado Jans, who was born on the 22nd of April 24. There is her two brothers here, Pieter Harms and Elzo Harms, and then there is here at the top her father, Harm Jans Hazelhoff, her mother, Aaltje Engels, and this is her stepfather because her father died very young, so her mother remarried and she married Harm's brother Jan. It's not Ian, it's Jan. So there's a funny habit of replacing the J with an I. And that's a habit that happens a lot in samplers as well. But yeah, it is a really charming sampler. It's completely black. They don't know why, because these girls were often quite well off. They had a lot of money. They could have afforded the finest of silks in the widest of spectrums. And they chose to stitch these really quite beautiful, quite stark black and white pieces. But I thought I would share that with you today. So this is a new one. I'm very excited to present that to you today. It is being stitched by a group of stitches in the US at the moment as well. But I will dedicate a proper episode to this sampler because it is an interesting story. Heike passed away fairly young, sadly. But it is a very intriguing story. Even relatives of Heike had a very important role in the Second World War, which is quite interesting. But I will touch upon that in an upcoming episode. So this is the Heike Hazelhoff sampler. That's this one. Oh boy, we're only one question in and we're already on about 15-20 minutes, I think. Question 2, which is sort of going from this one, was by Jane Rowan, and she asked, I love your red winter border sampler, but did you deliberately leave out the U? So the second question is, why are there often letters missing from antique samplers? Now, thank you, Jane, for that question. I get that question quite a lot. People sometimes don't like it. I know Ellen Reed doesn't like to not stitch letters and she fills them up. The reason that they're not there is that sometimes they wouldn't be needed. So they would be replicated. So for instance, like you saw on this one, she stitched what looks like Ian, but it is actually Jan. And that's a habit that they just used. When you look at the Latin script from a couple of thousand years ago, and you see inscriptions, they always use an I instead of a J. So that was like a quirk that was happening. Similarly, the U is often omitted. And I think that also stems from days of the Roman Empire where the letter V would actually be used instead of the U. When you look at the letter W, we actually say W instead of in Dutch where we say the, they. But it is actually two U's next to each other. So if you had a U or if you had a V, you could just use two V's and you had the W. So that would also be a letter that could be avoided on a sampler. But XYZ, a lot of languages actually don't use the XYZ natively. So in Friesland, for instance, they didn't have a lot of words with an X. They used the CK combination, CKS. For instance, if you were called Hendrix, now you could spell that with an X, but you would spell it back then with CKS. So there was no reason to have an X on your sampler, because it would just be extra stuff on there that you would not need. So depending on where your sampler is from, and also depending on how much space that the stitch you actually have to fill the alphabets on, what you do sometimes see is that the first alphabets are stitched completely, and then the larger the decorative alphabets get, the more letters are dropped out, where the last row sometimes is just A to E, and then it just stops. And it was purely because there was no need. If you knew how to do those big letters, you could do them all based on the little letters above. So that is why a lot of the letters are missing from antique samplers. The third question is from Judy Rose, Ruth van Mecklenburg, Marcia Maguire, Shari Kramer, Jas262, Louisa Sharp, and they all ask me, do you stitch in a hoop, in hand, or in a frame? Now, I use all three, but I prefer just to stitch in hand. When I get the chance, I just really like to just sew my crosses right onto the fabric where the needle hardly travels behind the cloth. I just keep the needle right on top and I just pedal through all of it. In my first Flosstube, I did show the Bristol sampler, which is on a frame, and that's purely because it's easy to stitch it on a frame. I do use a hoop sometimes when I have to do very complex back stitching, and I need them to be very neatly lined up. But even those, I try to sort of just keep the fabric taut in one hand and then just stitch it on. But yeah, in hand, I really, really prefer doing that over stitching in a hoop. I think the speed as well, because I work with only one pulled strand of floss, you don't have the worry of needing laying tools and all these things to get your crosses very neat and flat. I have a habit of, and I only noticed it a while ago, that every time I do a cross, I run my thumb really quickly over it, and I noticed that I was doing that. And I think that's my laying tool. So I just sew them on, and then I just make sure that it's rubbed the right way so that the stitch lies neatly onto the cloth. But in an upcoming tutorial on actually how to cross stitch and how to start and all these things, I will show you those techniques as well, and I will show you based on a hoop, because it's just easy to follow, but then I will also show you how I actually stitch in hand. The next question is by Darby Logan, and she asked me, what do you do when your stitching mojo is down? Good question. It happens to all of us. Life happens. Sometimes you're just busy. And I would say, don't stitch. Just put it away for a little bit. Don't stitch. Don't force yourself to stitch when you're not in the mood. Because the worst that can happen when you're not in the mood is making a mistake. And it has happened to me where I felt like I had the need to finish something because there was a new pattern coming up, or I had an exhibition that I needed to show some pieces for. And when you're under that much pressure, you just don't enjoy the stitching. And then when you make a mistake, you go all and it's no fun. So don't stitch when you're under pressure. Don't stitch when you just feel like you don't want to stitch. It's okay. Just don't do it. It will come back. Sometimes it'll be a week. Sometimes it'll be a couple of months. Just relax. Do other things. Do nothing. Just take care of yourself. Just relax. That's the most important thing. We do this because it's our hobby. Most of us don't have to make a living actually stitching things. So if your mojo is down, just let it be down for a bit. It'll come back again. One thing that does help sometimes with me when I feel a little bit on the lower end of things is just looking at pretty things. I have a beautiful collection of books, and even though I wouldn't copy stuff ever, it's really inspiring to just see all of these beautiful examples of what stitches have done before. So I do like to rummage through museum collections online. But just look at beautiful things, read books, and after a while you will get back into it. I always try to look out for things as well. So when I see a costume drama, for instance, I try and look at beautifully stitched things that are in the background, and often that sort of makes me get back into it, like, ooh, looking forward to do a bit of stitching tonight again. The next question is by 518 Stitcher, and she wonders, do you ever have time to stitch other designers' designs, and if so, who are your favorites? That's a very good question. I do love a lot of designers, actually. There's so many people out there. There's just too many to mention, because the variety is amazing as well. So it's not even that I would always want to stitch something that looks exactly like my designs. But there are some really fantastic people, like Blackbird Designs, for instance, that everyone knows, and it's just really well loved. I love Beth Twist from the Heartstring Samplery. She makes fantastic stuff. A friend of mine from Italy, Nikki from Nikki's Creations, you might know. She makes really beautiful sort of prim pieces. There's Tanya from Lily Violette, who makes beautiful, colourful, really cheerful pieces. I love them as well. And if I had the time, and if I could just sit down and start stitching whatever I wanted, I would definitely stitch those. But I do want to try and stitch as much of my own stuff as possible. And that's difficult because I just have more than I can actually stitch. But yeah, I really enjoy that. The sixth question is one that I have tagged on. It's not a question that was actually asked, but I saw it when I was looking at Brenda and the Serial Starter, and they were basically talking about swapping verses, and I think it was Brenda or Laura who said that, like, is it sacrosanct to actually do that or not? And I think they agreed as well that it was not, and you should just change it. But I have had emails as well, that's why I'm answering this question, where people ask me, like, am I okay to change XYZ on this sampler and personalize it? And yes, you are. I think no sampler is holy. You should do with whatever you want. You should stitch it in whatever colors you want. You should stitch it on whatever material you want. So if you get an antique sampler and they recommend stitching it on 46 count linen with hand-dyed, naturally dyed silks, and you go like, you know what, I'm going to stitch it on 20 count Ada with neon flosses, go for it. Just go wild. There's no cross-stitch police, so you won't get arrested for that one. Yeah, you should just do whatever makes you happy. I think it's really important. Like I said earlier as well, it's a hobby. You should do whatever makes you happy. And I also wanted to show you one stitched sampler, which was personalized, and it was done by Ellen. Hi Ellen, mentioning you again. She did a beautiful version of His Eye is on the Sparrow by Beth Twist of Heartstring Samplery, and I'm going to show you that now here. And I love that she used, I think it's Kant who said this, but I'm not sure. I couldn't find the verification for that one. There's lots of websites that give quotes that are not always 100% linked to that person. But I believe he did say this. We can judge the heart of a man by his treatment of animals. And I thought it was really beautiful. But I've seen also people who swap names on samplers and, for instance, stitch them with people who got murdered by police brutality. So there's a whole list of names on one sampler. And I think it's really moving that a piece sort of links to something that has meaning to you, and it should have meaning to you, whether that's a deep spiritual meaning that you might have with something, or a political belief or something, but it should reflect what you think is important. And if you think it should reflect that it is just a cheerful sampler. That's cool. If you don't like the religious verse because you're not religious, swap it for something else. I've seen samplers stitched over one with huge verses. Throw them out, throw something in that's over two that you like to stitch. There's no point in sweating on something that you're not enjoying, so yeah, just change it for something that's fun. I firmly believe that you should do whatever you want with those things. The next question is by Kate Brown, and she asked me, what brand of needles do you prefer? So I'm a little bit sad about this one. Last year, or maybe it's 2 years ago, I discovered Clover, and they have beautiful needle, or had beautiful needle packs. Notice the past tense. They came in 6 different or 3 different sizes of needles, 6 needles in a pack. They were absolutely beautiful. They were quite long. They were very fine with a tiny eye for the needle. And I really like stitching with them because they're still blunt tipped, but they're sharp enough to be worked on nice fine linens as well. I just love working with them. They are beautiful to sew the crosses on. And I like the 3 different needles that were in the packs, but I really like when I'm working on 32 count to stitch with the longest one, which is a bit bigger, has a ever so slightly larger eye, and it's just a joy to stitch with. Because I stitch with only one pulled thread, I like a small eye as well. I don't like stitching with a really big eye on a needle. I don't like how it looks or how it feels when I'm stitching with it. But yes, as I said, past tense, Clover has stopped manufacturing those beautiful needles. So because I have a shop, and I was living in the UK, I managed to buy every single last pack of them, which was only 6 or 7, from my wholesaler there. And I've kept them for my own stash. And I'm quite sad that they're gone because they were really my favorite needle. So my question to you as viewers is, what is your favorite needle that you stitch with? I've had some people recommend me needles. I will try them out. I've seen some really lovely tips with a little ball tip, which is apparently really easy. Not sure if that would be for me, but if you have any needles that are a little bit longer with a small eye and are still blunt tipped, do let me know in those comments below, because I really look forward to finding the next best needle. So thank you for that already. So that brings us to the end of the Q&A today. Today I don't have any works in progress. I have a lot of works in progress, don't get me wrong. There's a whole basket full of them, as I mentioned in my first video. But I don't want to show some of the works in progress right now because they are works that I will be sharing with you in upcoming videos. I want to do a little bit more work and I want the pattern to be ready before I start stitching on those again. But they are very exciting. I have received one lovely parcel from the UK 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and it is stunning. It's but actually I won't talk about that. You will have to see it in an upcoming video. I have a finish. Last time you saw me working on the Fraktur Love Sampler, and it's finished. And I'm really happy with this one. So I've stitched again a nice little hem around it. For those who like to see the backs of samplers, there you go. Yeah, this I've really enjoyed stitching this one. It was a really fun project. It wasn't too big. It was a couple of evenings sitting down and pedaling through with this one, and I've put like one full day and a couple of evenings, and it was good fun. The letters were really nice to stitch, so I tried to do all of the letters before I started working on the motif. Now this one is called the Love Fraktur Sampler, and I thought I wanted to finish it before Valentine's because I wanted to show you this one. And I designed this one based on, I don't know why I'm shaking this so much, it's a bit annoying for you guys to watch. It's like talking with my hands. I'll put it away now. But this is stitched based on the designs by the Pennsylvania Dutch, which is a misnomer because the Pennsylvania Dutch were not Dutch. They were from the Germanic areas, hence the beautiful Gothic lettering that you can see here. They called this fracture because of the slightly fractured lettering that they used in their work. And the documents that they had, their wedding documents, baptism documents, etc., they would illustrate those beautifully with little birds and flowers, and you saw distal things and all those beautiful symbols of love and piety, because they were quite religious people as well. So I think everything had for them some meaning as well. But there is a certain joy in seeing these celebrations of a union between two people. It's really nice to see those little birds and the little hearts and the flowers and the sun symbols and all these things that they brought from the old world into America when they came over, and they brought this culture with them. And it's just wonderful to see that they kept that alive and that they produced these beautiful things, and that it became such a unique style. Although it looks like older European works, it is very distinct for the Pennsylvania Dutch. So that's why I designed this one in that kind of a style, with the little heart here and the very long looking birdies and the tulip in the middle. I really liked stitching this one. So that is my only finish that I have to show for you. And that brings me on future projects. I have a lot, as everyone has. And I'm really excited about starting new things, because I think who is not excited about that? There's two projects that I wanted to share that I'm contemplating. I think I have made up the first one that I want to stitch and want to finish because it's small. But the first one I will share with you is the crowned heart. This one, it's a fairly big one. It is 271 crosses high and wide, which is not like a massive size, but there is a lot of stitches in that border. So just do be warned that it is quite a bit of stitching. But I really like this sampler. What I especially like about it is that it's I'm selling it as a wedding sampler, the crowned heart, because there was the tradition in a lot of countries that a bride would wear a wedding crown on her wedding day. So in Sweden, for instance, you have the beautiful wedding crowns that you can see in some old churches that the brides would borrow, or sometimes they would have their own crowns that they would wear. And they would have like big fake jewels sometimes in them, or be gilded. And it was very pretty, and it was like you were the queen of the day. Which is a beautiful thing. So a crown is often a symbol of marriage, and in this one I wanted to have that heart as the big centerpiece, and I designed it in a very sort of Scandinavian, sort of a Hälsingland sort of style. So it has all those sort of zigzag borders, but it is a little bit of a mishmash, sort of like it feels a little bit Dutch, it feels a little bit Scandinavian, but it is quite a unique design, I think, and I really want to stitch it, but I have been thinking about it. It is a monochrome design, like most of my designs are, but I'm tempted to actually tackle this one, don't know when, but as a full cover cushion type situation, and I don't know if I just want to stitch the heart and the surrounding bit in the center, or if I want to do the border as well. I think I should do the whole thing and make it a colorful one, but I will let you know. But I'm very curious. I don't know if there's many actual sort of tapestry stitches here. Do say hi if you are. But I think it would look really, really amazing stitched in like sort of embroidery wools on a like a big frame. So you would get quite a big one. If you would stitch this on 32 count, it would be about 17 inches wide and high, or 43 centimeters wide and high. The second project, which I actually kind of want to start now with, is a small one. And again, I'm sharing this one because we are coming up to Valentine's, and I think this would be a really nice little gift for someone as well. It's called The Joyous Heart. And this was actually a Christmas present back in 2019 for my sister-in-law. She was staying over with us, and she was looking for a little project to stitch. So I made this as a little kit for her with threads and linen and a hoop, so she could stitch this, which she has done, and it looks really pretty. It is only 103 crosses high and wide, so it is a fairly quick stitch. It's charted for 4 colors because she wanted something colorful, so I designed it for 4 colors. DMC options are given in the chart, but feel free to use any colors you like, and you can keep it monochrome as well, because that's the good thing about this design, is that there's no colors next to each other where you have to have 2 colors. If you want to stitch it fully monochrome, go ahead. This actually brings us to the end of this video today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I've had a lot of fun doing the bits of research for this one. I hope you learned something, or just enjoyed watching the little sampler collection that I have. I will be working on some projects that I hope to share with you very soon, so do keep an eye on this channel here. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below here. And if you want to get updates on when there's new videos, make sure to subscribe and ding that little bell, because that little bell is important. It will update you when you log into YouTube that there is a new video. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, look after one another, and happy stitching. Bye bye.